Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay, so now we'll discuss today this topic, electrostatic boundary conditions. Now, there are two reasons behind it that, you know, in our real life, I have already told you that the most common dielectric is air, and air is everywhere. So, therefore, any other material, it is mostly surrounded by air. So, it is very difficult to get a single dielectric. Uh, but when we consider one particular electrode, then typically it is surrounded by one dielectric. It could be a solid dielectric or liquid like transformer oil or maybe air. So there will be always a boundary between the conductor and a dielectric. And then there will be always a boundary between two dielectrics. For example, if you think about the insulators, which you see roadside, the high voltage insulators, so they are made of porcelain, but they are surrounded by air. So there is a boundary between porcelain and air, which is a dielectric boundary. So therefore, we will consider two different boundary conditions. One is, as you can see on your screen, the boundary condition between a perfect conductor and a dielectric. This will be first topic, and then of course we'll go between two dielectric. Now, first thing that I would like to mention that you all know that if it is a conductor, that we say that the charges are always on the surface. But why? I mean, there may be a lot of mathematical explanation. I just want to give you a very simple physical explanation. Now, conductors, you know, are the materials within which charges can move freely. So therefore, if I have a conductor, charged conductor, then it will have an electric potential, and it cannot have two polarities at a given instant of time. So at any instant of time, either it will be positive or negative. So depending on the polarity, there will be charges of one particular polarity. Now, you can argue always that why there cannot be two different polarity of charges. The reason is that since charges are free to move, so they will recombine within the conductor, and only that polarity of charges will remain, which will correspond to the polarity of the electric potential. Now, theoretically, consider that all the charges are distributed throughout the volume. Now, as I said, they will be all of same polarity, either positive or negative. So what will happen? As per Coulomb's law, there will be repulsive forces, and these repulsive forces will force the charges to move away from each other. So what will happen? They will not go towards the center of the conductor, but they will move towards the surface of the conductor. But at the surface, what will happen? The conductor is surrounded by a dielectric, which is a back conductor of charge. So when these charges, which are within the conductor, reaches the surface of the conductor, they cannot move further. So as a result, the charges are always on the surface of the conductor. This is just a very plain and simple physical explanation. But with this, we can say another one, that if we take any Gaussian surface which is within a perfect conductor and which is not enclosing the surface. So if it is a spherical electrode, so let us consider we take a Gaussian sphere within the electrode whose radius is less than the radius of the electrode. That Gaussian surface within the conductor will enclose zero charge, because there will be no charge in the volume. All the charges are on the surface. And as a result, we always say that the electric field within a perfect conductor is zero. But that is definitely not the case on the surface of the conductor and away from the conductor. That's why we will now discuss what is called the boundary condition of electric flux density. So now, for this, we will show a figure, and what we'll show is what is called a Gaussian pillbox. And this is like this. You can see these are typically a small cylindrical box. It is typically called a pill box because previously people used to keep their medicine pills in those type of box. So it is a pill box. This has a surface area of delta A, as you can see, and it has a height of delta, but delta is tending to 0. But it is not 0. It is like that limiting concept. Very small, but not 0. And we are also assuming that half of that very small distance is outside the conductor, half is inside the conductor, and surface charge density, we are saying it is sigma on the conductor surface, because as I have said, there will be charges on the surface of the conductor, but not within the volume of the conductor. So, if I apply Gauss's law to this pillbox, the equation is that surface integral of d dot ds will be equal to the charge enclosed by this pillbox. Well, fine, this is as per Gauss's law. Now let us expand it. How? We are doing it in this way. That this integral on the left hand side, that is surface integral of d dot ds, we are expanding it into 3 surfaces. One, you can see equation 6.3, top surface, bottom surface, and the wall surface. So you can see here this pillbox, top surface, bottom surface, and the cylindrical wall surface. So we will integrate this d dot ds over these 3 surfaces. Fine. Now we are saying that as the height of the pillbox is infinitesimally small, so the integral over the wall surface is negligible, because this surface area will be extremely small because delta tends to 0. So what happens? The surface integral remains only the 2, that is the top surface and the bottom surface. But now we already said that there is no charge within the volume of the conductor. Now that bottom surface, that is within the volume of the conductor. So then if we integrate there, it will not enclose any charge. So therefore, here equation 6.3 will say that this integral, that is integral over the wall surface, that is 0 because delta is very small. The bottom surface integral is 0 because there is no charge within the volume. So what remains is only the top surface integral. And therefore, we say that top surface integral d dot ds, therefore that will become, quite obviously, that ds is the area vector, and you all know that area vector we have defined as a vector which is perpendicular to the area as shown here, and then d dot ds will only take the normal component which is in the direction of the unit vector. So here equation 6.4, that surface integral of the entire pillbox becomes only the surface integral of the top surface. So it becomes dn, which is the normal component of flux density multiplied by the area delta A. Then what is the charge enclosed? Yes, as you can clearly see that the entire charge enclosed is surface charge density is sigma, and the area is delta A. So sigma into delta A, that is the charge enclosed. So we are saying that equation 6.4, dn into delta A is equal to charge enclosed sigma into delta A, or in other words, dn is equal to sigma. That means normal component of flux density is equal to the charge density. So this is the first boundary condition on the electrode surface. But what about, since this is the normal component, you can always argue with me that there has to be another boundary condition for the tangential component. The answer is yes, there is a boundary condition for the tangential component. But for that, we will not consider a pillbox. On the contrary, we will consider an infinitesimally small closed rectangular loop as shown in the figure 6.2. What is it? Here you can see A, B, C, D, A. So this is a rectangular loop. And we are again saying that this length AD and BC is equal to delta. And delta is very small, delta approaching 0. And the length AB and CD is equal to delta L. And electric field intensity, we are taking two components. One is En, the other is Et. En is normal to the surface of the conductor, Et is tangential to the conductor. Now, we have already earlier explained that E field is conservative in nature. That means line integral of E dot dl is 0 because E dot dl is work done. Because E is force, so force dot displacement is work done. So E dot dl over a closed loop naturally has to be 0. So when we are saying that we are integrating E over this loop, we are dividing it into 4 parts. First, we are integrating from A to B, then B to C, then C to D, and D to A. This is equation 6.7. That means we are segmenting the entire loop, closed loop integral into 4 different integrals. And the summation will be 0 because the closed loop integral has to be 0 for E dot dl. Then we are saying that since delta is very small, approaching 0, so integration over the length AD and BC, they are 0. So what remains is integration over A to B and C to D. Now when we are integrating over A to B, then naturally En will not come because En is perpendicular to this length, similar to CD. So what will come is ET, that is the tangential component. So here you can see that we are writing that the length of AB is delta L, which is small but finite. So therefore integration, as you can see here, integration of A to B E dot dl, that is therefore, before that, one point I have missed, that when we are taking the length C to D, this is within the conductor. And we have already stated that within the conductor, the field is 0. So therefore, integration over C to D is 0. So in this 4 integral of equation 4.7, 3 integrals are 0. What are those? That is integration B to C is 0 because delta is almost 0. Integration C to D is 0 because E is 0 inside the conductor. Then integration from D to A is 0 because delta is 0. So out of these 4 integrals, only one integral remains. But since right hand side is 0, therefore we can say that integration of A to B E dot dl becomes 0. And what is integration E dot dl? That is quite obviously Et multiplied by this del L, because Et is tangential to AB, that is this length. So E dot dl becomes Et into del L, because the angle between Et and del L is 0. So E dot dl is cos of 0 degree, so it is 1. So this integral, as you can see here, that E dot dl A to B, that is basically Et into dl, and this is equal to 0. But then del L is definitely not 0 because del L is finite, although it is small. So we say Et is equal to 0. That means the tangential component of the electric field intensity along the conductor surface is always 0. So therefore we get 2 boundary conditions. One, that is on the surface, or not on the surface, the volume, sorry, the normal component of electric flux density, that is equal to the surface charge density. But here there is an important point to be noted, that this dN, that is on the top surface of the pillbox, and this top surface of the pillbox is not on the surface of the conductor. So because there is a small distance delta by 2, which is very small but not zero. So this boundary condition, that is dN is equal to sigma, that is valid. We call it just off the surface of the conductor. Just off the surface. That means the distance is very close to zero but not zero from the surface. So this equation 6.6 is valid just off the surface. I will show you already. I will show you what happens exactly on the surface. In fact, we have already discussed it earlier, but I will show you later. And then the tangential component of the electric field intensity is zero on the surface of the conductor. So we have now two boundary conditions, one for the normal component, one for the tangential component. So therefore, what is the field intensity just of the conductor? Yes, that is quite obvious, that ET becomes zero on the surface. So just of the conductor surface, dN is equal to sigma. So equation 6.10 says that En will be dN by epsilon, so sigma by epsilon, or sigma by epsilon and epsilon 0. So this is the field intensity which is just off the conductor surface, and that is why we always say that if the surface charge density is high, the field intensity just off the surface becomes high. And that is the explanation that why corona takes place, that when the charge density increases, because if there is a sharp corner on the electrode surface, then naturally the area decreases, charge density increases, field intensity increases, corona takes place. This is the very straightforward explanation of corona occurring if there is a sharp corner or sharp point on the conductor surface. Here is a problem given. Look at this problem. Just I'm highlighting this. A charged conductor is surrounded by air. Calculate the maximum charge density that the conductor can hold at standard temperature and pressure, and the mechanical pressure acting on the conductor surface at that charge density. Very interesting about this problem is that this problem does not have any numerical value. Then you can always ask me, how do I calculate? Yes, there is something hidden in this statement, because it is saying calculate the maximum charge density that the conductor can hold. Now, what does it mean? It means that as the charge density increases, the field intensity just off the surface increases as per equation 6.10. And if it exceeds the breakdown strength of air, then there will be breakdown. So then it cannot hold that charge, it will be discharged. So the maximum charge density will be corresponding to the breakdown strength of air at STP. And what is that? That we know it is 30 kb per centimeter. So we convert it into volts per meter, 3 into 10 to the power 6 volts per meter. So then if I say that the maximum charge density is sigma m, so sigma m by epsilon 0, that is the maximum value possible, because after that there will be breakdown. So we get sigma m is equal to 26.5 mu c, that is microcoulomb per meter square. And by the way, you should never write only epsilon r. I have seen many students writing only sigma m by epsilon r, forgetting epsilon 0. No, it is always epsilon r into epsilon 0. For air, epsilon r is equal to 1. So we have written sigma m by epsilon 0. Mechanical pressure, yes, it is nothing but the product of charge density and electric field intensity. So this is the electric field intensity, this is the charge density, so multiply, so you get, it is the mechanical pressure. So you can see that at the time of the breakdown, there is a significant amount of mechanical pressure that develops on the conductor. It is only because of the fact that it is made of metals, that's why it is able to withstand this pressure. But if the material is different from metal, this will create serious trouble. So please remember that significant amount of mechanical pressure acts on the conductor surface when breakdown takes place. Now coming to the boundary condition between two different dielectric media, like one is porcelain, the other is air, or one is paper, the other is oil. There are so many examples. So again, we will consider a pillbox. The bottom part of the pillbox is in dielectric 1, the upper part of the pillbox is in dielectric 2. Again, the concept is same, that the area of the pillbox is delta A, and the height is delta, which is very close to 0. Half of it within dielectric 1, that is delta by 2. Half of it, delta by 2, is within dielectric 2. And we are saying that there is a surface charge density on the boundary, which is rho s. Therefore, again we are saying that integration, surface integral of dds is charge enclosed by the pillbox, which is coming from the Gauss's law. And again we are differentiating, that is surface integral of pillbox d dot ds. It has four parts. One is top surface of dielectric 2, bottom surface within dielectric 1, wall surface of dielectric 1, wall surface of dielectric 2. So let us look at it. See, there are four surfaces. One is top surface, which is within dielectric 2. One is bottom surface, which is dielectric 1. Then there is a cylindrical surface, wall surface, which is belonging to dielectric 1. There is another cylindrical wall surface, which is belonging to dielectric 2. So there are four surfaces where we are going to integrate. But we are saying that the wall surface area is very small because delta is close to 0. So we are neglecting these two terms, wall surface. So it is becoming equation 6.11, that surface integral of dds is surface integral over the top surface plus the surface integral over the bottom surface. And what is this value of it? So surface integral d2 dot ds, yes, again it's the same thing, that if this is the direction of d2, then d2 dot ds means this delta a, it becomes the normal component of d2 multiplied by delta a. So here you can see equation 6.12. Similarly, surface integral of d1 dot ds, where ds is delta a, and this is the direction of d1. So it becomes the normal component of d1 multiplied by delta a because of the dot product. So as you can see, 6.13. So therefore, and here you can clearly see that un2 and un1, if you take the two unit vectors, then they are in the opposite directions. That means top surface and the bottom surface unit vectors are in opposite directions. So therefore, when we write, it becomes d2 dot un minus d1 dot un, because of the two normal vectors to be in the opposite direction, into delta a. And what is the charge enclosed by the pillbox? Well, first of all, this is a dielectric, so therefore the bottom cylindrical part will also have some volume charge. Similarly, the top half of the cylinder will also have some volume charge. So volume charge density multiplied by delta A multiplied by this delta by 2, that will be the charge enclosed in the volume. But since this delta, the thickness is very small, we are neglecting that volume charge. What we are considering is only the charge on the surface, that is rho s, This is charge density, so total charge is rho s into delta A. So equation 6.15 says that this is the charge enclosed. The first part is the surface charge density multiplied by area. Second part is the volume charge density in the dielectric one multiplied by the volume. Third part is the volume charge density in the dielectric 2 multiplied by the volume. Neglecting second and third parts, we are saying that the charge enclosed by the pillbox is this one. So from equation 6.14 and 6.16, we write this equation, which is 6.17. That means d2n minus d1n is equal to rho s. And if this rho s is 0, that means if there is no charge on the sphere, that means if it is an ideal dielectric, then we write that d1n is equal to d2n. And from here, you can see that we can also extend it for the conductor. Why? Because if we say that this medium 1 is a perfect conductor, then d1 immediately becomes 0. And in this case, it becomes d2n is equal to the surface charge density, which is according to the conductor boundary condition. So you can clearly see that how all these are very well coordinated. Then naturally the second one will be the boundary condition for the tangential component of electric field intensity. For that again we take this rectangular loop A, B, C, D, E, F, A. Now here BC, the right part, is on the dielectric 2, CD, which is all in dielectric 1, then EF is in dielectric 1 and FA is in dielectric 2. So we are again saying that the line integral E dot dl is divided into, one is A to B, then B to C, then C to D, then D to E, then E to F, and then F to A. But then out of these four parts, we are assuming to be 0. That is B to C, which is delta by 2, C to D is delta by 2, E to F delta by 2, F to A delta by 2. So they are 0 because delta is very small. What remains is only A to B and D to E. So we have only these two integrals, and this summation is 0. And then these two integrals are nothing but the tangential component multiplied by the length, because they are in the same direction. Normal component multiplied dot product of L is naturally 0 because the angle is 90 degrees. So we write that it is E to T into delta L. Then E1T into delta L has to be in the negative side because A to B and D to E, they are in opposite direction. So if one is delta L, the other one is minus delta L. So it becomes equation as shown here that E to T delta L minus E1T delta L is equal to 0, or E to T is equal to E1T. And again, extending the same concept, if one dielectric 1 is replaced by a perfect conductor, then E1T becomes 0. Automatically 6.19 says E2T is 0, which is again same as that we have got for the conductor. I am giving a problem here. Read slowly. For a two dielectric arrangement comprising transformer oil as dielectric 1, epsilon R12, and mica, epsilon R2 is equal to 6 as dielectric 2, it is given that E1 vector, that means the field intensity in transformer oil, is this. Find E2, but two different boundary conditions. Number A, considering the boundary to be charge free, and B, considering a surface charge density of plus 70 picocoulomb per centimeter square, given that XY plane is the boundary between the two media. Since XY plane is the boundary between the two media, hence X and the Y components of E, they are naturally tangential components, and therefore they are equal on both sides of the boundary, because this is the boundary condition 6.19, tangential component is same. Now, therefore, we can write that E1x, you can see that E1x is 6 here, this equation. So E2x is also 6. Similarly, E1y is 4, so E2y is also 4. Now comes the question of Ez. That is, because xy plane is the boundary, Ez is the normal component. So we have to apply the boundary condition. So case A, the boundary is charge free. That means rho s is equal to 0. Therefore, d2n will be equal to d1n. So we expand epsilon r to epsilon 0 e2z, because e2z is the normal component, is equal to epsilon r1 epsilon 0 into e1z, because e1z is the normal component. Now e1z is given in this equation 9 kb per centimeter. Convert, and here you put, and so you get e2z. So therefore you get the expression of e2, because e1x, e2x and e2y already is given here. So you have found out e2z and put it here, you know. And if the surface charge density is 70 picocoulomb per meter square, so now our boundary condition is this. So put it here, find out what is e2z. And then again, write down the expression of E2, where E2x and E2y are given here, already determined. So you put 3.131 and then you get what is E2. So this is another way of computing this E2 when there is a surface charge density on the boundary. Now this charge can be negative, accordingly field intensity will get changed. There is a specific boundary condition for charge-free dielectric interface. That means when this rho s is surface charge density is 0. So let us look at it in a different way, that this is the boundary. The boundary is rho s is 0. So now d1 is here and d2 is here, and these are the different components, like which one is tangential, which one is normal, and so on and so forth. And this is the boundary, this dotted line is the boundary. So since rho s is 0, we are writing d2n minus d1n is 0, because rho s is 0. So d2n is equal to d1n. And what is d2n? d2n, and when this angle is theta 2, this angle is theta 1, d2n is e1n cos theta 2 multiplied by the permittivity. Similarly, e1n is e1 cos theta 1 multiplied by the permittivity. That is equation 6.2.20. And another boundary condition is the tangential component to be same, that is E2t is E1t. What is E2t? It is along this dotted line, that means E2 into sine theta 2. What is E1t? That is the tangential component. It is E1 sine theta 1. So that is equation 6.21. And if we divide it, you can see we get equation 6.22. Now you just tell me one thing, that I think you have already got a similar expression in other areas. For example, in light, you have this a very similar expression, which you have studied as the Snell's law, where you got the same sort of relationship, that the deviation of the waves, they are directly related to the material property. In that light case, it was the refractive index. So that means the angles were dependent on the refractive index. In our electrostatic field, we find that this angular deviation is related to the permittivity. Now you can see that they are all having a similar relationship. There is a reason behind it, because they are all electromagnetic phenomena, and that's why they are all having a more or less similar characteristics, only with a small differences. So one more problem we are giving, the flux lines of an electric field pass from air into glass. That means in this diagram, dielectric 1 is air, dielectric 2 is glass. Making an angle 30 degree with the normal to the plane of the surface separating air and glass at the air side of the surface. That means this angle, this dielectric 1 is air, so theta 1 is 30 degree. The relative permittivity of glass is 5, so this epsilon 2 is 5, epsilon R2 is 5, epsilon R1 air is 1. The field intensity here is 200 volt per meter. So that means E1, that is on the air side, it is 200 volts per meter. Calculate the electric flux density in glass. That means you have to find out D2 in glass, that is on the 2 side, dielectric 2 side, and also the angle which the flux lines make with the normal on the glass side. That means this angle theta 2. Now this is a very straightforward problem. So these are the given values, epsilon R1, epsilon R2 5, theta 1 30 degrees. So straight away put this and you get tan theta 2 and you get 70.9 degree as theta 2. That means this theta 1 is 30 degree, whereas this angle theta 2 is 70.9 degree. Then E1 is 200 volt per meter and the boundary condition is E1 sin theta 1 is equal to E2 sin theta 2, whereas theta 1 and theta 2 is known, that is theta 2 is 70.9 degree and E1 is 200 volts per meter. So we get E2 as 105.8 volts per meter. But we don't have to calculate E2, we have to calculate D2. So D2 is epsilon R2 E0 into E2. Again, I repeat, please don't multiply E2 by epsilon R2 only. I have seen many students making this mistake. Always put epsilon 0 into it. So put it here, you get 4.68 nanocoulomb per meter square. So these are the 4 boundary conditions along with some problems associated with it. So 2 boundary conditions for conductor dielectric boundary, 2 boundary conditions for dielectric boundary, and 1 boundary condition is always for the normal component of field, another is for the tangential component of the field. And these are so fundamental in electrostatic field that whatever be the case, these will be always valid. So this is a very important aspect, please remember. So that completes the boundary condition aspect. Of course, I will send you this note, but if you have any questions, you can ask me. And if you don't have any questions, then I will close the session. Okay, thank you very much for joining the class, and next class will be on Wednesday as scheduled. So you can log off now.